Assister à la conférence de presse de John Textor. Mais oui, d'habitude, vous avez l'habitude de me voir dans OLNS. On a rendez-vous à 18h. On est un tout petit peu en avance, mais surtout, on est en direct sur YouTube. Donc, vous pouvez suivre cette conférence de presse partout si vous suivez l'Olympique Lyonnais, y compris sur un canal anglais. Donc là, actuellement, ceux qui sont sur le canal anglais YouTube ne me comprennent pas, mais c'est pas grave. Je ne suis pas seul. Je vais me faire aider de mon traducteur personnel. C'est Jules Cross qui est à mes côtés pour patienter quelques minutes avant de voir la conférence de presse de John Textor. Bonsoir, Jules.
I recoup the ball and Memphis give me a good pass and I shot and I score.
Ceux qui ont la référence
Voilà,
comprendront.
comme ça, ceux qui veulent le voir en anglais peuvent comprendre un petit peu. Don't worry, it will be in English in a few minutes.
Il va falloir patienter quelques instants. On a un œil sur la salle où aura lieu la conférence de presse. John Textor, après la fin du mercato, va s'exprimer. Sûrement qu'il y aura des questions de la part des journalistes sur ce sujet-là, sur David Friio, sur le début de saison de l'Olympique Lyonnais, sur la suite de la saison, le championnat qui reprendra dès ce dimanche face à Lens à 20h45. Donc on va patienter quelques instants avec Jules. Et dès que ça bouge du côté de la salle de conférence de presse au Groupama OL Training Center, nous partirons directement. D'ailleurs, je peux me faire couper la parole à tout moment si le direct démarre un petit peu avant. Après, j'ai l'habitude avec toi.
Exactement, et j'en profite parce que j'ai sous les yeux le chat YouTube, et j'en profite pour dire à certains qui vont être un petit peu déçus parce que dans quelques minutes, ça va passer en anglais, donc faites bien attention au canal que vous avez choisi, parce qu'il y a un canal en anglais et un canal en français. Donc voilà, pour ceux qui ne sont pas anglophones, vérifiez bien sur quel canal vous êtes, et pour ceux qui sont sur Replay, pas de souci, vous aurez la traduction parfaitement.
On va en profiter pour rappeler un petit peu ce qui va se passer sur Replay cette semaine. OLNS, vous savez, l'émission tous les soirs 18h. Vous avez l'habitude de nous suivre pour certains. Exactement. Et vous avez bien fait, c'est quelque chose que je voulais souligner, vous avez bon goût. Mais également tous les magazines, il y a le premier magazine de la saison qui va arriver ce vendredi à 20h sur ce qui se passe dans l'équipe pro, Jules, et je sais que tu vas le voir.
Les coulisses, un petit peu un inside de ce qui se passe.
La vie au quotidien avec notre envoyé spécial, c'est Sèvres Romani qui est au plus près des joueurs et qui récupère ces images. Donc le premier magazine sur le premier mois de l'Olympique Lyonnais en championnat, ça sera ce vendredi à 20h. Et puis on va rappeler également, Jules, les matchs qui ont lieu ce week-end avec notamment les féminines.
Oui, le dernier match de préparation pour les féminines qui vont reprendre le 21 septembre avec un club champion d'Albanie. Donc ça va être le dernier moyen pour se tester quelques jours avant la reprise. Ça sera face au Vlasia Skoder, un club albanais. Donc ça sera ce samedi au Groupama OL Training Center à 19h30. Donc venez nombreuses et nombreuses si vous pouvez être là. Ou sinon ça sera retrouvé évidemment sur OL Play. Et la reprise, ça sera le 21 septembre, donc une semaine après, avec un déplacement du côté de Fleury, qui est une équipe toujours un petit peu compliquée, un petit peu un poil à gratter de cette D1 Arkema.
Et puis, vous avez l'habitude, les matchs aussi sur OL Play. 20h45, ce sera le match en déplacement à Lens, avec l'avant-match qui se passe ici pour avoir la compo en exclusivité. Et puis, l'émission avec Philippe Bruet à l'animation, à ma place, exactement à cette place-là, mais avec Yvon Marcelin et Anthony Réveillère pour les commentaires, pour suivre les matchs de l'Olympique Lyonnais et surtout cet avant-match et cet après-match que l'on débriefe tous ensemble. Et puis après, on reprendra la semaine avec nos petites habitudes.
Exactement, pendant qu'on voit là justement les images dans la salle de conférence de presse au groupe OL Training Center, où on attend d'ici quelques instants John Textor, et s'il y a 2 sièges, c'est également aussi pour la traduction, parce qu'évidemment John Textor est là depuis quelques temps, mais maîtrise quand même plus l'anglais que le français, donc il y aura évidemment une traduction. Mais je rappelle que pour ceux qui nous suivent sur YouTube, qu'il y a bien deux canaux, un francophone et un anglais, donc faites attention, si vous avez bien choisi le bon, ou si vous avez Wellplay, pas de souci, vous aurez tout bon.
Si vous ne comprenez rien, c'est que vous parlez anglais, et donc vous vous dites, que dit ce mec en rose bizarre dans mon écran? C'est normal. Quelques instants, ça arrive. On parlait de John Textor. Il est arrivé hier en France et il a passé du temps. Aujourd'hui, il a parlé, je sais, notamment au groupe. Il s'est exprimé auprès des joueurs. Et puis, il a eu quelques interviews cet après-midi. Et donc, cette conférence de presse, la salle est bien remplie. On l'a vu. Je pense qu'ils ont affûté leurs écrans, leurs ordinateurs, leurs crayons. S'il y en a qui écrivent encore avec des crayons de papier ou leur petite gomme s'ils veulent raturer, ne pas raturer plutôt.
Non, mais c'est une conférence de presse qui est évidemment très attendue, parce que c'était la première prise de parole officielle de quelqu'un du board de l'Olympique Lyonnais après le début de saison, après la fin du mercato, après des nouvelles dans le monde du football français cette semaine. On peut penser aux droits télé, il y a eu le tirage de l'Europa League il y a quelques semaines, donc il y a vraiment beaucoup de choses sur lesquelles on veut entendre John Textor pour savoir sur ce qui va arriver sur la suite de la saison pour l'Olympique Lyonnais, la suite du projet, sur ce qui s'est passé, faire un bilan de ce qui a été fait ou de ce qui n'a pas été fait. Donc on a hâte de savoir ce qui va être dit, on a hâte d'entendre les questions des journalistes et surtout les réponses de John Textor évidemment.
Nous aussi, on est aussi impatients qu'eux. Effectivement, on attend, on est dans les starting blocks. On va regarder cette conférence de presse en direct et tout de suite après, nous la débrieferons. Nous essaierons de prendre les meilleurs passages et puis de venir sur les thèmes importants que John Textor aura développés.
Et à mon avis, il y en aura.
D'ici, oui, je pense que les questions, ça devrait arriver, ça devrait durer un petit moment, parce qu'en plus, il a les traductions à faire. Donc, à mon avis, on est parti pour une petite heure avec John Textor, et ensuite, on reviendra dans l'horaire de LNS habituel, entre 18h et 19h, pour débriefer, revenir sur ces thèmes importants. N'hésitez pas d'ici là à vous exprimer dans le chat, on prendra aussi quelques réactions parmi vous si vous avez des questions. C'est le moment. Jules a un œil dessus, il est toujours dans les réseaux, donc j'étais très attentif. Reste un peu avec moi quand même.
Non, mais je peux faire deux choses à la fois. Effectivement, en tout cas, je vois qu'il y a déjà des anglais sur le canal YouTube. Donc pour nous anglophones, j'en fais un petit coup. Don't worry, it will be in English in a few minutes.
C'est beau.
Ça veut dire, ne vous inquiétez pas, ce sera en anglais dans quelques instants. I receive the ball and Memphis gave me a good pass. C'est tout ce que je peux faire en anglais.
Mettez la réponse dans les commentaires. Qui a dit cette phrase? C'était en réaction d'après-match.
Oui,
Normalement.
Tout pour l'engagement. Il fait tout pour avoir du monde.
Bah oui. Est-ce qu'il y a une réponse? Surveille un petit peu.
Alors, il faut savoir que c'est en léger décalé entre ce que. Voilà, donc il faut attendre un petit peu, mais je vais regarder.
Regarde encore.
C'est toujours en léger décalé.
Le programme, tu as parlé de la Coupe d'Europe qui est arrivée. Un mois lourd qui va être pour les équipes qui jouent la Coupe d'Europe et le championnat de Ligue 1. 4 matchs de championnat, 2 matchs de Coupe d'Europe, le retour de la Coupe d'Europe au Groupama Stadium, la C3 avec l'Olympiakos qui va arriver ici. On a un programme chargé et on a une réponse surtout à qui a cité I Receive the Ball.
Voilà, oui, effectivement, je t'avais dit que c'était un petit peu décalé, mais là, ça y est, ça commence à parler de Nabil Fekir, le grand Fekir, évidemment. Donc, évidemment, les gens avaient la référence, évidemment. Non, mais pour revenir à ce que tu disais, c'est vrai qu'enfin, ça va être le retour de la Coupe d'Europe pour l'Olympique Lyonnais, le retour de la Coupe d'Europe au Groupama Stadium. Ça sera ce 26, on est en septembre, oui.
26 septembre, oui, toujours.
Pardon, avec la réception de l'Olympiakos. Quelques jours après l'Olympico face à l'Olympique de Marseille, on avait d'ailleurs fait un débat sur ce sujet dans LNS. Pour ceux qui n'auraient pas vu l'émission de lundi, elle est disponible en replay sur la plateforme. Et on vous a mis un petit extrait du débat sur les comptes Instagram et Twitter d'OLPlay, que vous pouvez suivre également, OLPlay officiel sur Twitter et Instagram. Mais oui, ça va être un programme chargé, parce que les 2 premiers matchs, tu l'as dit, il y a Lens, il y a Marseille juste après, réception de l'Olympiakos, on va à Toulouse, on va du côté des Glasgow Rangers, il y aura aussi le match face à Nantes, donc ça va être un mois très chargé. 6 matchs en un peu moins de 3 semaines, on n'a plus forcément l'habitude, parce que sur ces dernières saisons, l'OL n'était pas en compétition européenne, mais donc ça va faire un programme chargé, et c'était là qu'on peut se dire que peut-être que la saison va enfin démarrer, et que peut-être les choses sérieuses commencent. Ce serait un petit peu dénigrant, parce qu'on a déjà eu des premières journées avec Rennes et Monaco, mais une fois qu'il y a la Coupe d'Europe qui est lancée, fin du mercato et Coupe d'Europe qui démarre, ça commence à devenir intéressant cette affaire.
On a encore quelques instants avant la conférence de presse de John Textor et j'ai envie de relancer ce petit débat en attendant pour voir les réactions que vous avez sur YouTube si vous ne l'avez pas vu. Quel match attendez-vous le plus entre la réception de Marseille au Groupama Stadium ou la réception de l'Olympiakos? C'est Olympico face à Marseille ou c'est Olympikos face à l'Olympiakos? Je ne sais pas comment on peut le baptiser. Ça avait été une grosse attente du côté de Marseille. On va voir si c'est les mêmes réponses sur le chat.
Oui, on avait fait un sondage sur Twitter et 70% des gens attendaient plus ce match face à Marseille. Et effectivement, c'est une grosse affiche, c'est un classique et on sait toute sa rivalité terrain et hors terrain sur les dernières années entre l'OL et l'OM. Mais c'est vrai que, je répète ce que j'ai dit lundi, le match qui m'intéresse le plus, c'est évidemment le retour en Coupe d'Europe face à l'Olympiakos. On espère que vous serez nombreuses et nombreux au stade, parce que retour de Coupe d'Europe, on veut un stade rempli. Et il y a un peu, j'ai déjà des réponses, donc des gens qui commencent à répondre à ta question. Bien. On a les deux. Alors pour l'instant, on a un peu plus de Marseille. Et je vais prendre un message, encore une fois, un commentaire totalement au hasard sur le chat de Steels Black 66 qui dit « T'es beau, Jules ».
Oh, le hasard fait bien les choses.
Je prends le premier message qui me vient.
C'est très bizarre. À chaque fois que c'est toi qui prends les réactions, c'est toujours des compliments.
En tout cas,
des choses qui te mettent à ton avantage.
En tout cas, les gens préfèrent, sont plus à l'attente du match face à Marseille.
Il n'y a pas d'autre chose sur toi?
Non. Pour l'instant,
ça
non.
suffit. C'est quelqu'un de ta famille, je suppose.
Non, c'est mon autre compte que j'ai créé. J'en profite, c'est pour ça que je suis sur mon téléphone.
Ah, tu t'envoies des messages à toi-même.
Les gens sont surtout en attente d'écouter John Textor qui devra arriver d'ici quelques secondes, quelques minutes dans la salle de presse du Groupama OL Training Center.
On patiente avec vous, tout comme le font les journalistes. On peut rejeter un œil dans cette salle conférence de presse au Groupama OL Training Center. John Textor arrive, les micros sont prêts, les 2 sièges pour lui et sa traductrice. Oui, c'est pas tous les jours qu'on a la salle aussi remplie. Sur certains matchs, il y a quelquefois un petit peu moins de monde. Mais là, on voit les têtes qui se tournent un petit peu dans tous les sens. On garde un œil dessus. Il lui a un autre compliment a priori pour dire qu'il était beau. Je l'entends rigoler dans son coin. Qu'est-ce que c'est?
J'ai un peu de tout. J'en profite, on meuble un petit peu, comme on l'a dit dans le chat. J'ai Jules Ballon d'Or, j'ai beau le t-shirt rose te va à merveille, t'es beau Jules, tes prédictions d'avant-saison, elles sont nulles.
Alors j'aime bien la dernière.
C'est vrai qu'il
Quelqu'un qui est lucide.
Jules le gros BG, j'avoue il est BG, Jules. Arrêtez de me dire que lui. Ah, il y a quelqu'un qui voilà. Et on parle beaucoup de moi. Arrêtez, s'il vous plaît. Continuez.
Et non, mais il a léché le coiffeur hier en plus, donc il a fait ça bien.
C'est pour ça.
C'est normal. Ça. Tu féliciteras ton coiffeur du coup.
Je remercie mon coiffeur et chez quelqu'un qui a mis John Textor, c'est un vrai gun, un américain, c'est pour ça qu'il est en retard. Le quart d'heure à la lyonnaise.
On le reconnaît bien. Ah ouais, il a pris vite les habitudes. Celle-là, on la connaît bien. Toujours l'attente. Il faut raconter un petit peu nos vies. On est comme vous, on attend impatiemment cette conférence de presse. Il y a quelques instants, je vous ai parlé du match face à Lens ce dimanche. Ce ne sera pas Anthony Réveillard qui sera avec nous, c'est notre autre consultant, c'est Arnaud Rivenet. Je me suis un petit peu emballé, mais c'est les rotations entre les deux selon les disponibilités de l'un et de l'autre. Mais ça sera bien Yvan Marcelin qui sera aux commentaires. On a fait encore le perdre après ce match 4-3 face à Strasbourg. Il s'est emballé dans ses commentaires. Mais on verra pour la suite avec Arnaud Rivenet. Il sera bien encadré pour vous faire vivre ce match sur OLplay. Il y a encore des commentaires. Les gens veulent te faire rougir.
Vous êtes fous. Vous êtes fous dans le chat. Il y a quelqu'un qui me demande la rêve de mon pantalon.
Non, mais il ne faut pas faire ça. Alors,
non, j'ai une vraie question. Pour le coup, Jules, c'est quand que vous délocalisez une émission? Alors, on a déjà parlé la semaine dernière. C'est vrai que sur les saisons précédentes, on a fait des émissions délocalisées de Lyonnais. Pour l'instant, il n'y en a pas de prévu pour le début de saison. Alors après, à voir ce qui va se passer tout au long de la saison. Mais c'est vrai que moi, personnellement, parce que j'en ai fait plus que toi tu en as fait une la saison dernière avec Maxence Cacré, il est délocalisé dans le stade, mais c'est une délocalisée quand même. C'est vraiment quelque chose qu'on
en public,
attend.
on va dire en tout cas.
Voilà, en public, c'est quelque chose qu'on attend, qui est quand même assez excitant parce que c'est un peu plus de travail, c'est des émissions plus longues. Il y a un peu la pression du public quand même parce que être ici sur le plateau au chaud avec les lumières, c'est très sympathique. Mais quand il y a une centaine, voire 400 personnes, je crois, pour la dernière.
On était 400 pour l'émission de Maxence.
On était 4000. Quand on est
ressenti 4000.
Ressenti 4000, non mais c'est toujours très intéressant. Et ça, c'est pas moi qu'il faut poser la question, mais notre responsable, Gaël Berger. Mais je sais que lui aussi a très envie de faire des délocalisés, donc à voir ce qui va se passer. Mais on espère en refaire avant la fin de l'année.
C'est toujours un plaisir de rencontrer ceux qui nous regardent. C'est vrai que le contact à distance comme ça n'est pas évident, ça passe par les réseaux. Mais ces émissions délocalisées en public, en tout cas, nous aussi on les attend. Donc on essaie d'organiser ça, mais pour l'instant on n'a pas de date à vous offrir. Et il se passe encore des choses incroyables sur ce chat.
Il y a des choses que je ne peux pas dire. On me demande la référence de mes chaussettes. On me demande si j'ai un compte sur une certaine plateforme que je ne sais pas.
Non, ça y est, on s'emballe. Non, je crois que ça s'emballe un petit. C'est censuré, on va arrêter là.
Non, mais après, n'hésitez pas, moi je me fais le relais. Moi, c'est juste comme ça me permet de passer aussi avec vous. Si vous voulez raconter quelques blagues, s'ils veulent poser des questions, comme celui qui nous a posé une question sur la délocalisée, n'hésitez pas, c'est ce qu'on fait de plus en plus dans OLNS.
C'est ça, profitez-en. On ouvre nos réseaux OLplay. Si vous n'êtes pas abonné sur le compte Instagram OLplay, c'est le moment d'y aller. Le OLplay _off. Sur lequel vous pouvez vous inscrire, vous abonner. Et souvent, on pose des sondages, on vous pose des questions. Et si vous avez des questions, c'est le moment. On a le chat en direct sur les contenus de l'émission, sur tout ce qu'on passe sur OLplay, les matchs de l'académie, les émissions, les magazines. On a pas mal de magazines qui vont arriver cette année. On a parlé de l'Inside qui sort ce vendredi. Mais dès le vendredi d'après, c'est Les Yeux dans mes yeux qui arrive, qui est le magazine consacré à l'académie. Fait par Mickaël Mouton sur la vie de l'académie, être au plus près de ce qui se passe. Et on avait Johan Louvel, le directeur technique de l'académie, qui était avec nous cette semaine, qui a passé un moment pour nous expliquer quel était son rôle dans cette réorganisation de l'académie qui est ô combien importante à l'Olympique Lyonnais et quelle est sa vision des choses. Et j'ai perdu Jules, je le vois sur le côté à ma droite.
C'est extraordinaire.
Tu t'amuses tout seul, tu t'amuses avec tes amis.
Vous êtes des cracks, on me demande ce que c'est mon gel, on me demande ce que c'est mon shampoing, on me demande ce que c'est mon caleçon, enfin c'est... Vous êtes fous alliés, mais j'aime bien. En fait, on a la communauté qu'on mérite quand même.
C'est une communauté très fashion.
Ben oui, après, ouais, j'ai
Tu remarqueras qu'il n'y a pas une question sur comment tu travailles tes sujets, comment tu as toutes ces informations.
Ils ont bien compris.
On est très sur le look, l'habit, la fashion victime.
On me demande de tirer un coup franc, on me demande mon compte Snapchat.
Ah oui, bon, alors là, il n'y a plus rien.
N'hésitez pas, si vous avez d'autres questions, n'hésitez pas, on fera. Mais... Non, mais si vous avez envoie les codes de ta carte bleue.
Ils tentent, et ils auraient tort. Vous allez être déçus, hein.
Ouais,
vous allez être très déçus. Hein.
Vous seriez on parle aussi beaucoup de Didier Roustan.
Oui,
alors, aussi à notre confrère Didier
effectivement,
Roustan.
Une pensée à ce grand monsieur du football français, Didier Roustan, qui nous a quittés, qui a animé tant d'émissions et qui a fait vibrer beaucoup de fans comme vous. Depuis petit, beaucoup de gens peuvent dire que depuis petit, Didier Roustan a animé leur passion du football. Et c'est une énorme pensée pour ce monsieur et toute sa famille et pour tout ce qu'il a fait dans le football. Donc voilà, grosse pensée à Didier Roustan. Qu'on soit jeune ou moins jeune, on a tous apprécié ce monsieur. Et tu as encore perdu dans tes commentaires.
Vous êtes fous.
On va fermer le chat juste pour ça. Hein.
Il y a des gens qui du coup posent vraiment la question de savoir comment je travaille mes sujets.
Vous voulez pas savoir non plus. C'est comme son compte en banque. Vous voulez pas savoir.
Par contre, après, il y a beaucoup de questions sur des prolongations de contrats, sur les déplacements des supporters. Parce qu'on a parlé du match face à Lens. Il y a des gens qui posent la question de savoir s'il y aura le nombre de supporters lyonnais à Lens. Alors, je n'ai pas l'information. Je ne sais pas si Gaël Berger, qui est dans ton oreillette, peut transmettre l'information. Mais il y a beaucoup de questions là-dessus. Jules, tu ressembles à Douillet Cailletta de Charme en moins solide et sans la barbe.
Voilà, comment se couper la parole tout seul. Il y a un truc quand même. Il y a un petit quelque chose.
Oui.
1m94, Douillet Cailletta de Charme.
Pareil,
Il en manque un peu.
à peu près pareil.
C'est hors taxe, on va dire.
Non mais voilà, il y a beaucoup de questions qui se posent. Alors on a deux trois qui me posent des questions. Ça me fait beaucoup rire. J'essaierai de répondre un petit peu. Vous êtes fou,
Bon.
c'est pas possible. Non, on va prendre des questions plus sérieuses.
On va essayer d'attraper les questions plus sérieuses. Si vous nous rejoignez à l'instant, il est 17h46. Nous attendons la conférence de presse de John Textor, qui a quelques minutes de retard. Ce fameux quart d'heure lyonnais, il s'est fait aux habitudes lyonnaises. John Textor arrive, vous voyez la salle hein, qui est, comme vous, en train de patienter. Donc on meuble, on essaye de trouver un petit peu des sujets avec vous sur YouTube. Si vous nous regardez, c'est le moment de poser des questions un peu plus sérieuses. C'est vrai que la tenue de Jules Cross, son compte en banque, vous êtes déçus globalement. Il y a des belles choses de temps en temps, je ne nie pas le contraire, mais vous allez être globalement déçus.
Il y a une question qui revient dans le chat, parce que quand on voit les images de la conférence de presse, c'est vrai qu'il y a deux sièges. Et on a indiqué que c'était une conférence de presse de John Textor. Et donc pour expliquer à ceux qui n'auraient pas l'information, c'est qu'il y a forcément une traduction. Donc il y a quelqu'un qui fera la traduction aux côtés de John Textor pour faire une traduction aussi bien pour lui pour les questions qu'ensuite ses réponses. Donc d'où les deux sièges. Moi j'ai une information que je n'ai pas, mais c'est pour la traduction.
Pour l'instant, nous attendons la traduction, nous attendons John Textor, nous attendons un petit peu tout, comme vous. Ça commence on va creuser les sujets, on va commencer à ouvrir d'autres pages. On va revenir sur le début de saison des différentes équipes, des féminines qui ont fait quelques matchs de préparation, des joueurs de l'OL qui, eux, ont mal débuté, se sont repris face à Strasbourg, et puis l'académie dont nous avons parlé aussi cette semaine, avec un derby qui a été remporté par les U17, qui a été un moment important. Yoann Nouvel en a parlé ici. Les derbys, ça sera des moments importants toute la saison, et il y en a dans beaucoup de catégories. Il y en a en N3, il y en a eu un donc en U17. Le match retour aura lieu ici, et puis il y a le retour du derby cette saison en Ligue 1. Petite question, on va voir comment vous réagissez sur le chat. Qu'attendez-vous le plus? On a parlé de ce match face à Marseille. Vous attendez plus Marseille que l'Olympiakos? Alors plutôt OLOM ou plutôt OLASSE? On va lancer ce questionnaire maintenant.
On l'avait fait en début d'année pour une prévision sur la saison, et c'était le derby qu'il avait remporté. C'est vrai que ça parle un petit peu du derby aussi également dans le chat, donc c'est forcément un sujet intéressant. Il y a des gens qui nous disent oui, quelqu'un qui dit after chez Jules ce soir, vous serez déçus. Non, c'est vrai qu'il y a beaucoup de gens qui disent, je reprends les questions, parce que souvent c'est souvent les mêmes questions qui reviennent sur des prolongations de joueurs, sur des déplacements de supporters. On me pose la question pour les virages face à l'Olympiakos, les déplacements de supporters face à Lens. Je n'ai pas toutes ces informations. Peut-être qu'on les aura dans la conférence de presse de John Textor. C'est pour ça que du coup, si vous voulez attendre, si vous avez des questions, peut-être pas forcément que sur mes habits ou sur le caleçon de Cyril, mais posez des questions surtout sur la vie du club, et on vous répondra.
On adore ça, en plus les sondages, puis après on adore se chamailler. C'est les débats qui nous animent. Tant qu'on n'est pas d'accord, ça nous va, on passe une bonne journée. Est-ce qu'on a des réponses entre ce petit débat OLOM
c'est le derby qui l'emporte largement, avec évidemment des réponses que je ne vais pas forcément citer, parce que voilà. Mais c'est évidemment le derby qui l'emporte, parce que je sais qu'effectivement on l'attend, parce que si je ne dis pas de bêtises, l'AS Saint-Étienne est descendu saison 2021-2022, peut-être que Gaël qui est en régie pourra me contredire, mais on a été privé d'une seule saison de derby, si je ne dis pas de bêtises. Ou deux saisons.
Deux saisons.
Ils ont passé 2 ans en Ligue 2, là, les Saint-Étienne. Je fais tellement pas attention à les Saint-Étienne,
Oui.
du coup j'ai pas fait gaffe.
Oui.
2 saisons, ah oui d'accord, peut-être. Donc ils ont raté la montée une fois.
Oui.
D'accord.
Oui.
Tu dis oui parce qu'il y a quelqu'un qui te dit.
Non, mais ça, et même ils avaient recommencé la saison avec des points moins la deuxième fois.
Ah effectivement, c'est vrai.
Voilà.
Ça m'intéresse tellement peu.
C'est vrai que c'est pas le club qui nous intéresse
oui, non,
le plus.
c'est pas forcément.
Sorti du derby, c'est vrai qu'on a vite fait le tour. Pour répondre à la question de tout à l'heure sur les supporters en déplacement à Lens, on vient de me prévenir qu'il y aurait 1000 supporters qui seraient de la partie pour aller à Bollaert.
D'accord. Donc ça va faire un parkage très intéressant.
Il y aura un parkage quand même avec les 1000 supporters qui arrivent souvent à bien se faire entendre. Donc on compte sur ceux qui feront le déplacement. On a toujours un œil sur la conférence de presse de John Textor qui est toujours au même point. Les journalistes sont patients, ça discute tranquillement. Ce que je vous propose, c'est qu'on se regarde un petit sujet de 2 minutes. Si jamais John Textor arrive pendant ce sujet, on l'interrompra bien évidemment. On va revenir sur les coulisses d'un jour un peu particulier pour les joueurs. Ça s'appelle le Media Day. C'est là où il se passe en photo ou en vidéo pour toutes les animations que vous pouvez voir dans les écrans géants ou d'autres demandes de la Ligue par exemple. Donc regardez, ça s'est passé fin août et c'était le Media Day à l'Olympique Lyonnais.
Bon les gars, aujourd'hui, séance photo avec l'équipe. On va directement au prochain rendez-vous et on va essayer de faire de belles photos. En plus, c'est fait beau gosse. Non, je... Ouais, bon, tout pour la maman. Ouais.
Elle veut dire quoi?
En fait, elle veut dire beaucoup de choses. Plus, ouais, je parle pas, tu vois. Je parle pas. On repose c'est dans la tête.
Non, il est beau là. Il a un bon sourire. C'est bien, ça passe bien.
Ça va être quoi toi ta célébration?
Moi, toujours dans la tête, fermé de bouche. On sait déjà.
Cornet.
C'est la célébration, tout le monde sait. Demande à Malik, ça veut dire quoi? Il va te dire ça, la même chose. Faites un choix. La mienne, moi, pour ma fille, toujours.
YouTube.
Brésil, frère.
Ouais, français.
Ah, bien.
C'est bon, c'est bon. Je comprends.
Donc là, je vais manger parce que j'ai faim. L'entraînement, il était bien costaud. Bon, à bientôt.
Nous sommes toujours en attente de la conférence de John Textor. Ce petit sujet sur les coulisses du Media Day, je vous l'ai dit, c'était fin août. Depuis, les choses ont changé. Le mercato est passé par là. Donc effectivement, certains joueurs que vous avez vus ne sont plus à l'Olympique Lyonnais. La question sera sûrement posée sur ce mercato à John Textor. Savoir comment il l'a géré, comment ça s'est passé, est-ce qu'il en est satisfait. Toutes ces questions-là, ça arrive dans quelques instants. La salle de conférence de presse est toujours pleine. Les journalistes ne sont pas partis. Donc ça veut dire que John Textor va bien arriver. Vous êtes au bon endroit. Et si vous êtes sur le canal anglophone, sur YouTube, puisque vous nous suivez aussi sur YouTube, c'est normal de ne pas tout comprendre. La traduction anglaise arrive, messieurs, dames. Jules Cross, traduction anglaise, explique à nos amis anglais.
Tu veux que je leur dise que la traduction anglaise arrive?
S'il te plaît.
Don't worry, it will be in English in a few minutes.
Qu'est-ce que c'est bien fait. Don't
Voilà.
worry, it will be in English in a few minutes.
Mais en tout cas, j'ai un peu un avant-goût de ce qu'on devrait avoir dans la conférence de presse avec les questions du chat. On parle beaucoup, tu l'as dit, du mercato, parce que c'est vrai que c'est la grosse interrogation. Il s'est terminé il y a quelques jours, je vais dire quelques semaines, même pas, un peu moins de 2 semaines. Donc il va y avoir beaucoup de questions sur les joueurs arrivés, sur les joueurs partis, sur les joueurs qui ne sont pas partis aussi également, parce que ça a été un vrai mouvement. Beaucoup de choses, le début de saison, ce qui s'est passé cette semaine avec les droits télé, avec la réélection aussi de Vincent Labrune. Donc il y a beaucoup de sujets qui vont être évoqués. Quel nouvel organigramme pour l'OL? Ça, c'est une question qu'on pose aussi également, parce qu'on a communiqué il y a quelques jours sur la mise en retrait de David Friio. Donc je pense que John Textor, évidemment, va s'épancher un petit peu plus sur ce sujet. Donc il y a évidemment beaucoup de questions. Et savoir un petit peu ce que je vois du chat, c'est également la stratégie globale et sur la vision pour la saison. Et aussi, certains se demandent si Pierre Sage sera en conférence de presse. Je ne pense pas, c'est essentiellement John Textor.
Non, ce n'est pas prévu.
Ça sera John Textor, mais voilà. Et beaucoup nous font remarquer sur le chat que qu'on a un peu dépassé le quart d'heure à la lyonnaise. C'est vrai, on est sur une demi-heure à l'américaine peut-être, Mato.
Oui, peut-être qu'il y a un autre quart d'heure qui vient se rajouter. On est comme vous, on patiente, on attend. John Textor arrive. Vraisemblablement d'ici quelques minutes, conférence de presse sur tous les sujets qu'on vient d'évoquer. Concernant l'Olympique Lyonnais, vous êtes au bon endroit, mais il faut juste montrer un tout petit peu de patience. Ça ne s'agit pas beaucoup, ce qui n'est pas pour me rassurer. On va faire une petite heure comme ça, je pense, Jules.
Oui.
Les vacances, ça s'est bien passé?
Les vacances se sont très bien passées.
Hein, tout va bien?
Non, on peut parler un petit peu de ce que... Ah, est-ce qu'on peut peut-être... Ah, non, si on veut... Ah bah, regarde donc.
Nous allons pouvoir donner la parole d'ici quelques instants. Vous voyez l'installation de John Textor avec Laurent Prudhomme à ses côtés. Et la traduction sera faite pour vous sur le canal anglophone pour tout comprendre. Donc ne quittez pas, restez avec nous. La conférence de John Textor arrive vraiment d'ici quelques secondes. On attend que les oreillettes soient mises pour que tout se passe dans le meilleur rythme. Les journalistes sont en train de brancher leurs ordinateurs, de se faire les mises à jour sur leur téléphone pour pouvoir être tranquille. Les photographes sont en place. On voit que là, c'est en train de mitrailler. On va vous laisser avec John Textor, cette conférence de presse. Et on se retrouve juste après pour débriefer, pour retenir les points importants de cette conférence avec Jules toujours à mes côtés et le chat. Vous pourrez bien sûr interagir avec nous et on répondra à quelques questions, bien évidemment par rapport à ce qui va être dit. Je vous laisse avec John Textor.
But at least I can hear you. You there?
Yes, I am. Okay, I hope that level's better for you.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Once again, bonsoir. I'm John Textor, president of Olympique Lyonnais. Laurent's with me as well. I think we know everybody. The purpose of this press conference, in large part, is because we haven't had a press conference in a while. Given the long summer, we haven't seen each other in a while, and we're going to provide a bit of an update on the overall business, and we're going to start with the end of last season, as certain decisions we made last season end up carrying into the summer mercado, and they affect us both financially and competitively as we move into the next season. And so we're going to talk a bit about the business side of things. We're going to talk a bit about football. And it's not really on the agenda, but if we don't find time to talk about the wonderful politics of French football, as we saw play out yesterday, I think we'd be missing a golden opportunity for fun and enjoyment. So just to check, is the translation working simultaneously for people? Okay, it's wonderful. Okay, last year, remarkably awkward season. I think I've been quite public about the mistakes I made in the prior summer, not making some obvious decisions, not making some, is that better? Not making some obvious decisions over the summer and allowing the team to move into the season unprepared. Obviously the worst start, I don't know, I haven't looked, maybe in the history of European football. Certainly no team had ever escaped relegation, with such a bad start. And, by the grace of God, we ended up having a wonderful season. We were able to exercise great freedom in the winter mercado, thanks to the cooperation of the DNCG and their support of our budget plans for the second half of the season. We purchased a number of players. We brought players in on loan. And we also made some moral commitments along the way, some players that ended up helping us incredibly during the season as starters and off the bench. Saïd Benrahma, Mama Balde, Oral Mangala. These were players that were taken on loan, and we very much wanted them to be a part of the squad. Not, knowing everything we would do in the next transfer window, but wanting to reward them for their great contributions and also keep the family together. I highlight those three players in particular because this is a going forward conversation. It's a summary of this summer mercado. And those were three special situations that were loan situations. And we very much wanted to keep them part of the club. So that meant in terms of purchases, we started the summer market day one, with some purchases before really going into kind of what was available out in the greater market at that time. The plan, which we did not execute well on, though I think at the end of the summer, we're quite strong competitively and going forward. But the plan was to level up the squad and change the paradigm by which, Olympique Lyon would choose to compete. Over the last few years, because of the strength of our academy, we've been giving first team minutes to very young players and showcasing them. Not only were they helpful to the team, of course, but showcasing them for sale. When I showed up, it was a wonderful thing. I went to one game. I think 9 of 11 players on the field in one particular game had all come from the Lyon Academy at some point, either fresh from the academy or returning from, their play elsewhere. And that's impressive. It really speaks to the strength of the academy. But it also speaks to the way we were using the roster in some ways, granting time to 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds. And, obviously with the sale of Bradley, with Lukeba, with Malagusto, that was the beginning of a change in the way we would look to do business. So now, instead of trying to bring a player onto the squad that has zero cost to us and selling that player for an average of 30 million euros, the idea going into this summer would be to acquire a player for 30 million that would help us win not just in France but in Europe, and a player that with European minutes as currency you could sell for 60 million. So these are theoretical numbers, but the point being, I wanted to level up the squad. I wanted our acquisition strategy for the first team not to be the sourcing of players from the academy, but rather buying players that we knew could play in Europe, could be competitive, could help beat the kind of clubs that we're going to face in Europe, like the Tottenhams of the world. So that was a strategy going in. There was an article that I did not read directly. It was communicated to me, and I'm sorry, I'm going to have this wrong. There was an article that ended up getting all over the world because of the way, people just pick up threads of stories that said that we had promised 100 million in sales to the DNCG, and if we didn't deliver that, we were going to be punished. And those of you in France know that the process doesn't really work that way. You put your entire budget in front of the DNCG, and they decide whether or not they believe it, and they give you a determination as to whether or not they trust your sustainability plan. And there are many sources of revenue and cash that go into such a budget. And so any characterization that we made a promise of a particular number, and if we don't deliver it, we're going to be punished. I mean, that's may not be how that carried here in France, but that's how it was repeated everywhere else and translated into different languages. So I want to give you a little visibility into what was in our budget. In our budget, keep in mind that Olympique Lyonnais Group, the publicly traded company, has been renamed Eagle Football Group as a result of a shareholder resolution that was passed at our annual meeting with full board support. The publicly traded company now has a global purpose. The resolution allowed us to freely exchange assets, cash, in different directions, where the club in Belgium might take on players that are still an expense to Olympique Lyon that competitively should be in Belgium, that the club in Brazil might do the same thing, that the club in Brazil might loan money or invest money in the Eagle Football Group, the French listed company, that Olympique Lyon might invest in players that are ultimately loaned to these other clubs. I'm trying to stay away from specific examples, but the point being that Olympique Lyon Group is a public company. The football club that you know here is actually a subsidiary of that public company, which is Olympique Lyonnais SASU. So when you take the budget to the DNCG, you're now taking to the DNCG a budget of a multinational company that is engaged in player transactions with other clubs in the group, with other clubs beyond the group. It not only owns a football club here in OL Sassu, it owns a basketball arena as it did. It owns a women's team in Seattle as it did. So understand, it's quite a confusing budget that we take to the DNCG that is unlike that of many other clubs in France. So what did we put in our budget related to this club and these player transactions? The idea that we would level up the squad meant that we would look to sell as much as 130 million euros of players this past summer. That's what we budgeted to sell. We also budgeted to sell a basketball arena and concert venue, which is LDLC Arena. Right? We also budgeted and projected to sell the women's team in Seattle. We also, keep in mind, this is called Eagle Football Group. In our budget, we told the DNCG that we would sell our interest in Crystal Palace Football Club. The reason I go through all of this is that before you even get to our success or failure in the player sales market, you have to understand the total context of our budget is that of a multinational corporation in sports, entertainment, even technology. It's not just a football club. Now, what did we want to do with 130 million euros of player sales? Well, why was it so high should be the first question. Actually, sorry. Let me summarize the level up concept. The idea was sell 130, buy 211. Well, that's a number that hasn't been reported. It's not entirely a good idea to report just one side of that proposal to the DNCG or in our budget, because somebody goes out and somebody comes in. In this case, our goal was to sell 130 million and buy 211 million. The idea would be that we would have to really rationalize the roster because we had a high number of players. Remember, we had that sanctioned window in the summer prior, the Laurent Blanc summer, and we had 23 million euros that we could spend in total, and we bought a lot of players at the level of 2 million and 3 million and 5 million, and we did some loans, and so we had a lot of roster additions. Great men, they helped us, and some of those players are still with us in the primary rotation today. But then when we got to the next window, it's we call it triage in the United States, going into the emergency room, and we had to buy a bunch of players and we had to save the season. So now you get into the next summer, the reason we would project to sell 130 million euros of players is because we had a lot of players. And we have the wonderful opportunity and challenge to now play in Europe. And as much as these men may have helped us survive and not get relegated and move up the ladder, we did want to change the nature of the squad because we want to win in Europa League, not just, be proud that we got there. So if you sell 130 million of players, you're going to buy 211. The DNCG looked at us and said, hey, you're not really going to spend 211, are you? And I said, well, we're going to have to make sure we sell some players first. And so those two numbers very much relate to each other, but also understand that if you miss one part of your budget and you get revenues or cash flow from another, you're fine. So that's what I want to talk about. We are selling our interest in Crystal Palace Football Club. We are intending to use the proceeds to pay down debt and provide working capital, which is necessary for Eagle Football Group and Olympique Lyonnais, and also for our growth initiatives, which we still like the idea of growing our academy operations around the world, creating better reach in the identification and sourcing of talent. We did successfully sell the women's team in Seattle. We successfully sold to Jean-Michel, thank you, Jean-Michel, the arena. Those were terrific transactions for us. They were, in my opinion, non-core to the focus on football. And we did not reach our sales targets. Well, let me say that in a funny way. I do think we reached our sales targets, giving credit to the people that needed to generate sales. We didn't really reach our transfer targets because some of the players that had expressed an interest or we deemed were likely to leave in the summer chose to stay. It's incredibly good news that Alex chose to stay. I like to tell everybody he called me first. I don't know if that's true, but I was crying when he called me. It was a great moment. Well, yeah, great moment, but it costs you a transfer fee. We've all heard recently the story of Ernest Nuama, a situation that I read quite wrong. I was getting indications from people around him that he was really looking forward to the Premier League, and we had 3 teams that came in for him in the Premier League. And yes, I did get on the phone and give him a very persuasive speech to take his opportunity in the Premier League, got him all the way into medical. And funniest story I think I've ever heard, he just maybe announces he's going to the bathroom and made sure it was like a 2-hour bathroom break that he never returned from. He wasn't leaving. So that cost you a transfer fee. But am I happy he stayed? Unbelievably happy. When you look at a kid and you think, well, he's only mildly committed to this club until he goes to the Premier League, and then you learn very differently that he was emotionally struck and hurt and didn't want to go to the point that he just vanished. I don't want to encourage this kind of behavior with other teams, but I immediately contacted Ernest and said, I'm sorry. I learned a lot. I think the fans learned a lot about him, and I think he's going to absolutely destroy people for us this year. So these decisions, are being made by players that now see Olympique Lyonnais as a much better place to be. We're the big club. Yes, we have the beautiful facilities. Wives and families love being here. The food is incredible. It's much better than Paris, I will tell you. But now we're playing in Europa League. So we're the big club playing in Europa League. And I did underestimate I overestimated the ease by which people would gladly take these offers and move on. So what does that do to our cash flow? Well, you can't go out and buy $211 million worth of players when you don't sell your 130. I think if I just do the math on that, we bought 145 million euros of players. We sold only 40. We have, I guess that means a 95 million sort of net purchase number. And our original plan was to have an 80 million net purchase number. So please, as I talk about, maybe quite openly for your expectations, quite openly talking about our numbers, missing a target, in terms of sales, and then not executing fully your buy means it's not a huge change to our budget. Instead of being net negative 110, we're negative 95? Yeah? No, our plan was negative 80. We ended up negative 95.
110.
No, that's what I wrote down, but I think that's a mistake. Anyway, we sold 140. We bought 145 in this window. We sold 40, right? So there's your negative outflow of, actually that's 105, right? Yeah. You get the point. You're talking about a 20 million swing. You're not talking about a 100 million swing. Now, where are we with the squad? Look at the roster. We're stronger, at striker. We're stronger at winger. We're stronger at midfield. We're stronger on the back line. We strengthened in every phase of the game. And, at keeper, we retained, we promoted, and we added, right? So from striker to forward to midfield to back line to keeper, we believe we're stronger in every phase of the game. It may not have been exactly the level up plan that we had proposed, but let's talk about that. It was the weirdest transfer market I think anybody's ever seen. And And, I think we know that. We came out of last year, we went right into the Euros. We were told, okay, everybody's going to wait a bit and see what happens. And then you're going to go into the Olympics. And that created a bit of a distraction. And nobody really knew why the market wasn't sort of picking up for clubs all over Europe. Then Saudi decided to hold back budgets and cut budgets in many cases. The Premier League clubs were also late into the buying market. It was an impossibly difficult summer. The impact on our cash flow as a club, not difficult in the aggregate, but difficult in terms of the timing of cash flow, because you have all of the heavy payments of the prior window coming due, those big installments in the summer. You've got sales that don't happen. Even players that you think you've sold then decide to stay. So those are numbers that are really a surprise.
Late payments
Yeah.
from
Late, yeah. Didn't want to draw too much attention to that, but our international television provider was more than 45 days late paying for last season. It's not a huge number, but for a club like us, it's 5 million euros. It doesn't show up. For smaller clubs in France, impactful for everybody. And I'd say it was a tough cash summer for a lot of people across football, and certainly it was for us. Now, on the aggregate, we did execute on the sale of the arena. We did execute on the sale of the women's team, and we're executing very well on the sale of Crystal Palace. We hired a company called Rain Group, which is a specialist in selling sports clubs, among other things. 14 bidders in the process, 5 very serious. We have 2 offers, and we expect more. We expect that sale to be completed before the end of this year. Tremendous cash boost for us when that gets taken care of. So I think what I've done is tried to carry you through the transition from last year through the summer. I guess the final word on the Mercato and the competitive posture of the club. Look, it is true. We were the #1 club in France on points accumulation for the second half of last season. I wouldn't say we're the #1 team in France. I would never say that, team to team. I mean, we still haven't beaten PSG. But in terms of what this is about, which is earning points for games you play, we were the best in France last year. And look around the roster, we've only become stronger. Ignore, a slow start as we like to look forward. But this team is considerably better prepared, man to man for every phase of the game going into this season. I was asked about our objectives yesterday. Our objective is to win this league. Laugh, mock all you want, but these guys don't go out there playing against the logo of PSG. That's, our Eiffel Tower too. Man to man, we've got great players. They've got great players. Other teams, you've got Monaco, sure, beat the crap out of us a few weeks ago. Like, they're really, really good teams in the upper tier of French football, but we expect to be among the very best of them. And we didn't have the level up plan work effectively based on, player sales and transfers, but we ended up with a much stronger team. So that's how I would characterize the summer window. I'd say going into just to finish some of the cash impacts and promises, because we're going to be issuing a press release shortly after this. And one of the things that we're going to point to, the different promises that we made to ourselves and to our budget. The DNCG was actually pretty smart on this. They said, okay, John, if all this stuff doesn't happen, we think you need to put in $65 million. So I signed a commitment at that time. I don't think this has been publicized before, that I would personally fund 65 million euros just to cover the gaps if our player sales numbers didn't hit the targets. I've already funded 22.5 million euros of that. Given the timing of things, I'm going to have to put another 40 million euros in just the coming weeks. The sale of Crystal Palace will be a nice replenishment of our working capital as we get towards the end of the year. And frankly, I don't know how other teams are going to survive the incredible drop in television revenues, which is an absolute massive, mistake by our leadership to leave us in this particular situation. We're going to survive it because we're a multinational organization that had other assets that created liquidity. We're going to survive it because, we're very fortunate to have things turn the right way at the last game of the year. We did get into Europa League, so now our cash flow and financial outlook is that of a Europa League club. We have real problems in this league with teams that aren't able to access those tournament, prizes, as a few of us will. And so, we're doing our best to just contribute to good ideas and good governance as much as possible. We're limited in our ability to do that, on the outside of that governance process. But I can tell you the toolkit that we have as a multinational organization with these assets. I mean, without this ability to access cash differently, this would have been an impossible season to navigate. But we go forward into the fall, looking forward to, that business outlook playing out the way we expect, and we look forward to the year competitively. I do think we're stronger, and we're going to look to the top of the table and always look up the table and move forward. Laurent, I don't know if you want to cover any gaps or go right to questions or.
Non. Tu as parlé de la situation.
So, yes, you had mentioned the TV rights problem. That was a problem during the summer, delays in payments. And so in the summer was very complicated, but not just for us, for other clubs as well. And so we managed it. And I think we are stronger for the coming season.
True. I guess maybe we can take questions. We didn't touch on David Friio, but maybe I'll, rather than make a statement on that, just go to questions, as I'm sure you're going to ask a little bit about his situation and our plans going forward. So should we start with Q&A?
Bonjour, Jean-François Gomez.
Hello, Jean-François Gomez of Le Progrès. So you mentioned David Friio, and you mentioned a difficult mercato that you pulled through with some success. Ma'am, if you even, what can you tell us a bit more about why you have removed David Friio?
I don't like all of the rules in France, but there's one I do like, which allows me to duck your question. French law suggests that I should really not answer your question. The employee is in some state of suspension where, we're in conversations with him, and Laurent is meeting with him and discussing his status as an employee and moving, out of the company. I would just say generally, he's a good man, worked his butt off, contributed significantly to our success last year. Just as I want to level up the squad, I want to level up every position. And I've made a decision that we can be stronger in the management of our football department. We do not work like most organizations. We take advantage of the collective brain trust of our scouting organization. We're very scout heavy in terms of what I rely on. I like to say I don't make football decisions, but I like to sort of force out of people, get the courage of their convictions and get the answers that are in their heads that they often don't communicate. And so we have a very lively, collaborative process by which we agree to sign players. And we actually do get every, scouting head of every one of our organizations, not just here in France, but beyond. And we make decisions as a group with heavy emphasis, of course, on, the local scouting heads for that particular team. And so the model of a sporting director somebody like David, I don't know that that's really right for us. I think what we're really talking about in terms of need is overall management of a football department and relationships with the coach and the players and the operation of the football department. It's really not about player selection and player recruiting and deal making. So we're looking to upgrade every position, and we're looking to fine-tune the profile of the people that we have in certain positions. So I hate to dodge your question, but I am somewhat required to be opaque about that. But I would say that he wasn't, the right fit for that profile we're looking for in terms of football management. He's going to be very well taken care of by his contract and honoring his contract, and I expect it to be an amicable separation. It's probably as much as I can say about it.
Absolutely.
Bonjour, Monsieur Textor et Laurent Prud'homme.
Hello, Mr. Textor. I'm from Le Parisien. You talked about the future sale of Crystal Palace shares. Now, I understand this is important to your financing for OL, but you're also looking to invest in Everton, I believe. So could you say a bit more about that? What impact would that have for the OL?
Well, your question may have been about finances, may have been about competition, so I'll answer both. The acquisition of Everton, the potential acquisition of Everton would be funded by new equity that I'm investing. That contract, it's very important to understand, that contract, as it's being contemplated and drafted, is with myself as the buyer, not Eagle Football Holdings in the UK, not Eagle Football Group in France. So the buyer of Everton is John Textor, ostensibly. Hate to talk about myself in third person, but I'm trying to be clear. And so we're forming a new holding company called Everton Football Group, and I'm the principal buyer of that group. I have invited a couple of other friends with terrific resources that will support that acquisition. It's contemplated that I'll be the majority shareholder of that small holding company. So expect it to be highly collaborative with Olympique Lyonnais and the other clubs of Eagle Football Group, but legally very separate. So in that sense, it will have no impact on the financials of Eagle Football Holdings or the French company Eagle Football Group or Olympique Lyonnais Sassou. It's just a great collaborative partner, and the acquisition of that is going to be separately financed with no debt, with 100% equity. It's just a straight equity purchase of the shares of Everton Football Group. If it happens. While I like to feel it's greater than 90% probability, I'm not the owner of Everton Football Club, and he still has plenty of options.
Bonjour, Monsieur Textor. Bonjour.
Hello, Mr. Textor. I'm from L'Équipe. According to our information, some agents or suppliers say they have not been paid. So are you behind in your payments? Is that tied to, and when do you expect to pay, and is that tied to your shortfalls?
Well, I'll answer the question generally because I look at numbers a little more top-down, not individual cases of payables. But we were carrying an extremely large, payables balance, with longer dating than you've typically seen with Olympique Lyon in prior years. And that's really what I was speaking to in terms of yes, you have comfort that your larger cash initiatives are happening, but the timing of things the late payments from our television people. We also had late payments from other clubs to us. We weren't the only ones experiencing a difficult sales season. There were also delays in factoring, where clubs finance receivables, and there's a lot of concern and perceived risk in the financing market when they see a league that's losing 30% of its television. And that's not just 30% of your television. As Laurent can probably tell you more specifically, that also means your sponsors, because your exposures. The amount of subscribers that we used to have at Canal Plus was massively greater than the amount of subscribers we now have under DAZN. So every number, from the direct payment from television to what people want to pay you for sponsorship and advertising, imagine any business suddenly loses like 30% of its revenues. That's kind of what French clubs are facing. And yes, that did cause our payables balance to go up considerably and to become more reliant on extraordinary transactions like the sale of a club or the sale of an arena, because now you're not getting the revenue through your normal sources. And so, yes, some of that stuff did catch us by surprise. The DNCG, every time I get up here and I talk about how smart they are, I'm really just not patronizing them. You know, they looked at the same numbers. I think they had a much more realistic expectation that this TV shortfall was coming. We were getting messages from leadership that said, don't worry, I've got a really big number coming from beIN Sports. Well, it didn't happen. So a lot of us were caught by surprise. Our payables balance did go up considerably. You know, the first people, you know, to complain, I would say, are always the agents. They even complain when they're fully paid. They complain about commissions that they think they've earned that they haven't. But real suppliers have definitely been stressed in our system, and our deferred payables balance has been reducing and reducing and reducing. And now we're at the point where we know what the TV deal is. And so I really do have to pull the trigger now and inject the additional capital that I promised I would as a backup. And so I had signed that 65 million euro commitment early in the year. I've funded 22.5 of it. Now I have to fund the rest. And that will come from me personally. I've asked Laurent to put it in. He said no. I don't know. Did you? You said no, right? Maybe I didn't ask nicely enough. But yeah, those stories are true. And, you know, we're a big club. So when they happen with a big club, they get reported that way. And, you know, we expect, you know, we're getting towards the end of the summer and the cash flows are getting easier. And we appreciate the patience of everybody who had to deal with us and our challenges this summer, but we're working through it.
Et comme l'a dit John, on est un grand club.
And as John has said, we're a big club. So obviously people talk about it. We're a listed company. And so, you know, the information gets around. And as you've noticed, you know, we had a sharp drop in TV rights. But on top of that, we've lost 24% because one broadcaster didn't pay in time, saying that the contract hadn't been signed, and yet they're broadcasting matches. So all kinds of excuses. But in the end of the day, this impacts all of our clubs. And like John said, we are managing this situation, and we weren't hiding the fact that we were behind on payments, but we communicate all the time with our suppliers to manage as best we can.
Édouard Gère, MC Sport et BFM Lyon.
BMFC Sport. About coming back to, from BFM TV.
Oh, hi. It's far in the back, and you're in the dark.
David Friio sera-t-il remplacé?
Will David Friio be replaced? And you mentioned a lot of figures, but Anthony Lopez, Ryan Cherki, Mamadou Sarr. So some people were saying that that was something that you decided on your own.
Look, people like to say that the big bad wolf, the American, is the one making all the controversial decisions. I'll just go ahead and say, if it makes your story better, that's true. I make all the bad decisions Michael Gerlinger and Matthew, they make all the good decisions. I don't know how to answer the question because you really strung together a whole bunch of topics without a clear question. You mentioned different players in different contract and player situations, some here, some gone. So could you be a little more specific about your question? I see you're, okay, texting. Maybe you can give him back the mic.
C'était plus une question.
Well, it's a question about human resources matter. So Anthony Lopez, how did it go? How, number 4, Ryan Cherki.
Okay, so let's stop there and talk about Anthony Lopez. You said, how did it go? Can you tell me what you mean? He's still on the squad. He didn't transfer out. What's your question, please?
Well, the human management, your human resources, you give us a lot of. I'm just wondering, how is it that he's number 4 and he didn't leave, in fact, with just 1 year to go on his contract?
Again, I don't. Yeah, I love the scarf. You seem like a very nice man. I still don't hear a question. How did it go? I don't know what that means. He's a goalkeeper. We promoted another goalkeeper into the first position. We hired an additional goalkeeper into the second position. I'm not sure I understand the question. Anthony was given multiple opportunities to leave the club into a starting position in France. He chose not to accept any of those situations. It's certainly his right to do that. He's been at this club a long time. He wanted to stay and either stay and fight for a position or possibly wait for something better. That's the great thing about football. The club can make a strategic decision on a player, and the player can decide he wants to, stay and live and play within his contract. Keepers also have options that other players don't. The joker rule extends with keepers, throughout the entire season. So his opportunity is to stay here and fight for a job, the same opportunity as every player on the roster. His opportunity may be greater between windows than other positions because he's a keeper. So I apologize for challenging you. I just didn't understand the question when you just say, how did it go at a human level? That's the comprehensive story of Anthony Lopez within the football department as I know it. Did that answer your question?
Pas tout à fait, mais au niveau de Ryan Cherki, on en est.
Well, not totally, and what about Ryan Cherki? What's the contract situation there?
Not totally. I talked for a half an hour on your question. I must have covered it. What's the story with Ryan Cherki? I actually would like to share with you a little bit about my thinking on players that are running their contracts out and likely to become total losses economically for a club. So, yes, he's a great player. Yes, he helped us win important games last year. And if I were to do nothing and allow him to play right into the roster this year, he would help us win games again. Understand, though, the moment a player decides to turn down PSG, he wanted to go to PSG. I don't like selling players to PSG, but I agreed because we're a players' club. We like to honor their wishes. That didn't work out. He came very close, it sounds. I don't entirely know, with Borussia Dortmund. But when a player then, decides he doesn't want to go to PSG, he doesn't end up going to Dortmund. He did, and he has the right to do this. He interviewed with Fulham, a great coach. He didn't like the fit there. Crystal Palace in particular likes him also, but the player wanted to stay. So my decision is to now view this competitively and economically. Every minute of playing time reflects, it's a currency. A minute is a euro. And depending on your business plan, the value of those minutes has to be viewed differently. So if you're a club like ours, it starts every year with a loss of 100 million euros before you sell your first player. Then you understand that you have to sell, on average, 3 players for 30 million euros just to break even. That's what it means to be a big club, running a big academy, fighting to get into Europe. So on that basis, every minute of play, I'm sorry I'm answering your questions with your hand motions. I guess you're not satisfied, but I'm giving you a view into this business model and into the mindset of making these decisions. Every minute is currency. So you take the amount of playing time a particular player has. When that player has decided he's no longer an asset of yours because he said, I won't let you sell me and I'm going to run my contract down to zero, then you have to look at those minutes and decide, should you allocate those to a player that's not an asset, or should you allocate those to a player that is an asset? So the cost of Ryan Cherky's minutes, if he's not an asset, are roughly 27 million euros based on my calculation on what he played last year. So it doesn't just cost me his salary, it costs me 27 million euros in addition to his salary, because those are the minutes that are taking away from the players that could showcase and potentially be those 3 players that we sell for 30 million each year to maintain break even. So you cannot let players that are not an asset destroy your business model. I can find other players that are assets, that want to grow, that want to fight, that want to be at Lyon long term, that will take those minutes and help us win games just as good as Ryan Cherky. So that's now been explained to him. He was given a choice. Sign with the club. Here's your offer. Go into the loft through the training period as your second choice. If you come out of the loft at the end of the transfer window, yes, you're on the first team because you have that contractual right, but you're not in our plans. Or option 3, sign with Dortmund, sign with PSG, sign with Fulham, sign with Crystal Palace. So ultimately, upon thinking of all his options, we had terrific meetings with Ryan. I think he better understands the necessities of running a football business. I think he could probably, after listening to me talk for 2 hours with him, he could probably be general manager of a football club after that meeting. But he decided, upon facing his opportunities and thinking about, yes, his strong love for this club, he decided to sign a multi-year agreement. And we expect him to do that. And the moment he does, he'll be back in the plans for the first team. Until then, he's just training with us. Come on, I must have answered your question on that one. You have to say yes. Yeah, just a nod. Yeah? Okay. Yeah. That's yeah. Would you like me to go longer? Because I can. Right? So. Is the contract done? Oh, sorry, I'm not getting a translation anymore, but I did understand that. It's because you spoke English. No, the contract is not done. It's very close. It's very friendly. It's very cooperative. There's discussions right now over the length of the contract, but the terms generally, I think, are done. And I hope he's happy. I saw him in training today. He's growing his hair out kind of long. That typically means somebody's happy. So we look for good things from Ryan this year. Yes?
François Gutin-Lombard, le progrès.
Le progrès, François. So you've spread out your debt. You're bringing in cash thanks to the LDLC sale. So what's your strategy for managing the debt in the coming years?
Well, I don't like debt. The debt at the club is really just on the stadium. So we did a nice refinancing of the stadium a while back through Goldman Sachs and MetLife. That debt is perfectly fine. I think we pay 5.8%. It's attractive debt with a very good lender, a long-term lender. The debt that we have at the holding company, there's a certain amount of debt we took on at the holding company that, combined with my prior investment in the clubs, my additional cash investment at the time of the acquisition, the cash investment of my partners, combined with money from Ares Management Group that helped us buy Olympique Lyonnais. A major portion of that debt will be paying off by the end of the year, probably 40% of that. The rest of it's long-term at a decent interest rate. Still, I don't like debt. One of the things that we announced that we're doing is filing for a listing on the New York Stock Exchange for the holding company, Eagle Football Holdings. Those filings with the Securities Exchange Commission are happening imminently. They will first be filed confidentially under the rules of the Securities Exchange Commission. So we're hoping to complete the initial public offering of the holding company's common stock in 2024. That would mean the pricing of the IPO in 2024. And the principal purpose of that would be to heavily pay down debt and to fund our growth initiatives, which we've outlined at different times, our academy expansion around the world, these types of things. So we don't like debt at all. We think it's a great time in the public markets. We are not just a football organization. We're diversified sports, entertainment, and technology. We expect our technology revenues to exceed our football revenues potentially in 3 to 4 years. That's maybe a bold prediction, but we think the audience of a club and the accessible audience of a club, bridging through our clubs to the audiences of our opponents. We think football is, one of the fastest ways to reach 1 billion people, any industry I've ever seen. And so the diversified model, sports, entertainment, and technology of Eagle Football Group is attractive, I believe, to investors in a way that just a football club may not be. And we look to see our football clubs benefit from that competitively by hopefully being, much better off in wealth and resources at the holding company. So that's our plan long-term for the debt. I will say that not from the perspective of the Olympique Lyonnais group, now known as Eagle Football Group, but rather from my perspective personally. And I make that comment because it's very important to make a legal distinction. This comment will not be in the company's press release later today. It's my personal goal to invest more in this, and I'm planning on making an offer for the remaining shares, the publicly traded shares of Eagle Football Group, and I'll be going to the AMF within the coming weeks, proposing a plan to tender for those remaining shares at what is obviously a substantial premium to today's price, and is a price that would even be in excess of the €3 per share that we paid previously. And I'll be giving shareholders a choice to take cash at that amount or to take shares in our publicly traded company on the New York Stock Exchange. So that's something that will also be happening in the near future as a part of this larger capitalization plan and the full answer to your question, which I appreciate the question.
From OlympiqueLyonnais.com, or the links with Nottingham Forest. There were high transactions there, and we get the feeling that you're paying a lot for players. Could you say a bit more, and should it not be regulated a bit more?
Well, to take the last part of your question, I don't know why it should be regulated. It's capital that was used by a company of which I'm the majority owner. It's capital that I put in. I don't think anybody gets to tell me how to spend our capital. So no, I don't think it should be regulated. I did get this question previously from a journalist who's just said, Transfer Market says he's worth this. How could you pay double or whatever the number is? So that's a two-part answer. Number one, Transfer Market is often very inefficient as a barometer of value. Number two, sometimes price is window dependent. So I would say to any journalist who asks a very smart question, did you overpay for Niakate? Just have some fun with this. Do the exercise. Go back into the market at that particular point in time and say, you need a left-footed center back badly, because you're playing Dua Kaleta-Carr out of position, and you now have qualified to go into Europe, so you not only have to cover that weakness for the French Ligue 1, but you now have to challenge yourself and be ready for Europa League. So go into the market at that particular time and give me a list of the other left-footed center backs that were available and in the market. We looked at Agard, from West Ham. The cost was 40. We looked at other players. Either the quality or the experience wasn't there, or the price was even worse. We look at Mark Gay, who I believe Niakate is as good as Mark Gay. Now, everybody in the UK is going to laugh at me about that because Mark's a great player, and he was a starter, and he's now captain of the England team. No offense to Mark, I love him, but go into the market and find out the pricing of left-footed center backs. So there's Branthwaite, 21, 22 years old, and they're asking 60. There's Mark Gahey. Crystal Palace turned down 65 plus 5 on Mark Gahey. There's Agard for 40. So find me the left-footed center back that can step into this great club and go beat Tottenham in Europa League, and that's not a player that you're going to be able to buy for 15 million. So I'd say it was probably a seller's market. Maybe Niakate in a different transfer window might be considerably more affordable because there are 4 or 5 other choices. But please, have fun with it. Go back into that market and find the left-footed center back that I could have signed for 15 that's ready to go beat Tottenham. And you might find one, but there's also the moment in time. Okay, the guy's available. He's going to sell. There are 3 other clubs that like him. I got to get him. And I'm going to overpay, if that's overpaying, with my money, sorry to say it, and I'm going to prepare this team for Europa League. So it'd be great if the fans would thank me for overpaying instead of criticizing me for overpaying with my own money, because it is, as the DNCG line of credit was required out of me, it was my money. So I'm going to make good decisions and bad decisions. We'll see. If we get into Europa League and we beat the crap out of Olympiacos, which is owned by the same guy that owns Nottingham Forest, he's a good friend of mine, then I'm going to tell him over cocktails later that night that he sold me the player too cheap. So we'll see. One day's mistake is another day's genius.
C'est sûr, si le joueur il est performant, même si vous l'avez
Well,
payé cher.
yes, even if of course, fans will be happy if it's a great player. You seem to be very involved with Botafogo. Some people say that you're more involved with Botafogo. That's your wife, and OL is your mistress. So some people are saying they're a bit disappointed. Can you reassure them that OL is not secondary?
First of all, my actual wife asked me the same question, if the football clubs came before her, and I believe she trusted my answer, but it's an ongoing dispute in the household. The question about Botafogo, clearly that was like a pure startup. It was a social club. The social club had limited resources, technically would be insolvent, and so under that law, you come in under that law and you're given a team and you have to start it from scratch. You take a very small amount of employees from the social club and then you have to fill everything out. And just naturally, making the personal investment, building the staff from sort of the base, having some of the horrible, struggles we've had down there with match manipulation, that, please pay attention. We now have proven, and the Senate investigators said we proved it. The press down there still overwhelmingly says we haven't. But yeah, those struggles, make you closer to a club. And, I always say when you come into a club, you don't just get to put on the Lyon hat and say, hey, I love this club as much as you guys do because I'm the owner, right? Like, I've got to earn it. I've got to suffer. I've got to see the joy of it. And, that love and that affection and that commitment, comes over time. Well, the commitment comes right away. The emotions sort of develop over time. So this club already had a huge football department, already has people making a lot of decisions, doesn't need as much from me day to day as the club in Brazil did. And so, yeah, it's fair for people to say, yeah, look at him. He loves Botafogo. Well, man, we had some struggles here too, right? And, I don't know when I really fell in love with this club, But I'm a kid from Florida that has more green in his closet because they only sell 2 colors in Florida. It's pink and green. And I can't even wear my entire closet anymore. I put on boxer shorts when nobody's looking, and I have to throw the green ones out. So I'm not there with you guys yet, like as a Bat Gone or as an Ultra, or, but I'm getting there. And I put just as many hours into this club as I do any club. I do view them as a family that helps each other. I think the fans here are starting to see the benefits of that collaboration. And it's also seasonal, right? We're at the height of the season down there where we lost the championship last year under weird circumstances, and we're right back in the top of the table now, whereas this is just getting started over here. So you'll see an emotional roller coaster of me depending on where we are in the season. And I can assure you, nobody's going to be happier, more excited, or after we, beat Marinakis, nobody's going to be more drunk than I am on the thrill of that victory, if and when it happens. So, and social media, I would say I'm probably more liberal on social media in Brazil because they just accept more. You guys are just way too damn critical here in France, and I look at every social media post and I'm like, no, I'm not going to send that. Right? Because I just don't want to hear it. But in Brazil, you get to say whatever you want, and it's gone the next day. So I guess I've given you hopefully a full answer there too.
Bonjour John, bonjour Laurent.
Hello, John. From 20 minutes. I'd like to come back to the question about Edward for a successor to David Friio. Do you need a sports director?
Touching a little bit on what I was hinting before, it's definitely a different profile than a classic sporting director that says, I manage the football department and I pick the players. Like, somebody calling me up and saying, hi, John, I just made a deal. That's sort of objectionable, to me in our environment because we make deals. Like the collective, the brain trust of our sporting department, and the brain trust of Eagle football, the way we help each other. So we're not looking for somebody to come in and pick players. We're going to be very heavy in reliance on scouting. We are looking to strengthen the overall management of the football department and the support of the coach and the support of the players. So the profile of the person we would bring in is going to look a lot more like somebody that really knows football, that really understands coaching, player relationships, somebody that's a resource to the coach. The coach has to have somebody to talk to other than the owner. The owner's an idiot. I call up and say, why did you run a 3-5-2? And I thought you should that relationship doesn't need to exist at all. But the coach does need somebody, to work with, to not only communication when the coach needs it, but also when the players need it. So there are sporting directors that do both, but we're just not looking for somebody to come in and say, well, I am picking the players. That's not the profile of Eagle football. So yeah, we're gonna add in that football management department. It's just not going to be the classic sporting director definition.
Bonjour.
Dabiato for Mercato. So there was so many players stayed. You consider that a failure, and is that going to impact the winter mercato or the next summer mercato?
Well, it's interesting. The players that I thought were going to leave were players that I did not think were supremely committed longer term. Like, Alex is obviously as committed as any player on the planet, but, where he was in his career is one thing. Ryan had always talked about leaving. Ernest, I think I told you, I misunderstood his ambitions for OL. So when those players decide to stay and they tell you why they're staying and you hear that commitment that all supporters would like to hear, that failure turned out to be a blessing in disguise. And then you look at the roster and boom, every position, we're stronger. Financially, the really cool thing about Eagle football is people that are joining our system, especially down in Botafogo, that have a dream towards getting to Europe, or specifically in some cases getting to Lyon, are now absolutely destroying people down there. So Thiago Almada, he's worth a ton of money. Luis Enrique, he's probably doubled his value, just started for the national team and then came on last night and played very well. That's a player who in his contract, he gets to raise his hand and say when he wants to come back to Europe. So does Thiago Almada. I don't think there's any owner in the world that's giving the choice to the players the way we are, because we actually have the pathways and the openings for them. So if you look at Botafogo and players that joined us because they have a dream of being here, Cuyabano, the left back, total surprise. Igor Jesus, got him out of the Middle East. Not a surprise to us, total surprise to the world. He's incredibly valuable. Up and down the roster, players that want to be here, that want to prove it there. So we're set to have a record transfer window in Brazil at the normal end of their season. So it's not a weird transfer window for them. Their season ends in early December. Those players will be selling into other clubs or transferring to our clubs come January. And I think we may have missed the 100 million in sales here, but what's the value of a top winger for the Brazil national team, right? That's a big number. What's the value of these players? I think we've got an 80 to 100 million euro January coming just in Brazil, and we have a ton of players ready to fill in for them to help Botafogo win the next year. And they want to come now because we're probably the only multi-club that is really, really activating the collaboration and creating these pathways. And we're signing players in large numbers. Please look at the press down there now. We're spending 45% of our revenues on salaries, and the big clubs, Flamengo and Palmeiras, they're raging about financial fair play and trying to stop Botafogo as if we're breaking some rules. All we're doing is signing players at what you in Europe would consider, below average transfer fees for big prospects, and they're complaining about it down in Brazil because they don't know how to compete against this model of collaboration. So, it may have been a failure financially here. We may have learned a lot about the strength and the heart and the commitment of our players that want to stay here, so that's a good thing. But we're also learning that the players that want to be here, some of whom we may not have room for them because we only have 4 international spots, they may end up going elsewhere. So, that's the cool thing about a multi-club.
On fait une dernière question, s'il vous plaît.
Last question.
Oui, bonjour.
Hello.
C'est bon, ça marche?
Yeah, bonjour.
Alexandre Corboz,
Alexandre
Club.
from
Justement, c'est un peu pour
Butzball
rebondir
Club.
là-dessus. Ça
I'd
veut
like
dire que
so
Almada, c'est pas sûr qu'il
Segued
vienne
Maida.
cet hiver.
Does that mean he's not going to come this winter? Because you've said Adrielson to Botafogo, but and Almada, is that certain?
So I think you were only asking about one player, Thiago Almada, correct? Based on the move of Adrielson. Was that do I have that right? You're asking if it's certain, is Thiago coming?
Oui, en quelque sorte, mais c'est aussi est-ce que Thiago va venir à coup sûr à l'OL?
Is it sure that Thiago's coming this winter to OL, or is there some other plan in the works? And Adrielson, is it sure that he's coming back to OL, or is there some different plan?
If it is Adrielson's choice to come back, Adrielson will be back. And if it is all goes as expected, stays healthy, stays interested, all that, Thiago Almada will also come. We have some interesting plans with regard to just say the European qualification of existing players that currently don't qualify as European players. And we also have some attractive player movements in mind that will allow us to bring those players back. Adrielson will surely come back to Europe because there are multiple clubs interested in him. But, he does also have an opportunity to come back here I think everybody should know what I learned about Adrielson here and what Pierre will tell you. He's among our very best defenders on this team. It's a little unusual the way it happened because I honestly thought he would stay on the roster as we were making certain decisions with Mamadou Sarr. I think Adrielson, by the end of camp, proved that he was going to get a significant amount of playing time, given the large number of games and the quick rhythm of Europa League, playing every 3 to 4 days. So I do think he proved enough to be here. He's going to do very well here. He went back to Botafogo, both out of choice and out of need, and I think him getting more playing time down there is one of the best defenders in Brazil. Remember, he got a national team call-up right before I pulled him to France, and his lack of playing time here is probably why he didn't get another call-up. So he's a very strong player, deserves to come back. Thiago Almada is going to fit into our lineup quite nicely, and we have we're always trying to manage that 4-player maximum. We are also going to be making a specific request now that Vincent Lebrun has promised to take the ideas of this collective, other candidates, clubs, all sharing ideas with them to improve our product in France. And we're not going to improve our product to export out to the world. Nobody's going to care about our television games if we're structured the way we are. So one of the issues we want to challenge the other owners to expand is this 4-player limit. The idea that we could bring a player from Korea or bring somebody from South America opens up the French football product to much, much bigger televised audiences. It would be great for every club here in terms of, revenues, television revenues, advertising revenues. I think there's a way to protect players from France while at the same time being more open in terms of international players. The way we count a European player is somebody in Europe or any other, country in Africa where, we've got a long-term relationship or reason to sort of count them as European. Honestly, we need to think smarter about opening up this league to the world, giving clubs the ability to be more flexible in inbound recruits and giving people around the world more reasons to watch us on television, which will bring more revenues. One last example on this very long answer. We started broadcasting our Molenbeek games down into Brazil through Botafogo TV on YouTube. Last year, we had a second division game for Molenbeek that had 170,000 live viewers watching it from Brazil because we had Brazilians on the pitch. That's what happens when you open up your mind that France is an international league. When you have people like JP Callot, who gets on a call and yells, "This is a French league, everybody must speak French," right? This is unbelievable. Well, that's the mentality that has caused our revenues just to plummet, right? Because we need to open up this product. We need to export this product. We need to give people reasons to watch because the television model isn't working. Our revenues are dropping, and this league is just going to die a long, slow death unless we advertise the beauty of France and the beauty of this French football product to the rest of the world. And we need to start by taking that limit of 4 players and expanding it. And yes, let's start signing people from Japan and Korea and South America, but let's protect the French-born players to make them the core of this league, and let's start making some money so the smaller teams in this league can actually survive. So we are talking about going to the league and asking for a reprieve on that 4-player max right away. With or without that, Adrielson and Thiago Almada will still be back.
Merci infiniment.
Right. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Il a été très peu question de football finalement.
Well, we haven't talked much about football here. What are the ambitions then of OL? Okay, so you're still saying it will be a failure if you don't get to the Champions League?
Yes. Yeah, first of all, one thing that wasn't discussed at the league meetings yesterday was football. I can tell you that, right? So I appreciate the question. Yeah, this is a question that gets asked a lot. I've seen it answered many different ways. You can have a successful season that still ends in the failure to achieve your objectives, right? You can still grow as a squad, and we can have a lot of successes, and we can feel very good about the long-term project. But yes, it's still a failure if we don't get back to Champions League. It's a failure if we don't win the league, right? I mean, we have 2 games against PSG. We got to win at least one of them. We beat them in points for the second half of the season. Yeah, they reloaded. They have a great team. But yeah, our ambition is to beat everybody in the league and end up at the top of the table. And you can decide how realistic or unrealistic it is. That's your, that's your right. But yeah, you can be very proud about the project, but it still ends in failure if we're not in Champions League, of course.
On ne voulait pas finir cette conférence de presse sans.
So we would like to put in a word for Didier Roustan. A very sad day for French football with the death of Didier Roustan. We're seeing on the social media a lot of posts. Didier Roustan arguing with Jean-Michel Aulas. He was a great fan of our team. He called me last year. And he told me that, well, he was asked, he wanted Alex Lacazette's away jersey. Okay, so, he loved our team, he loved our players, and so we are very sad for his family at this loss.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Voilà la conférence de presse de John Textor et Laurent Prudhomme que vous avez pu suivre en longueur. On était ensemble il y a un peu plus d'1 heure maintenant, 1h15, 1h15, oui, on peut dire 1h15 quand John Textor a pris l'antenne. Beaucoup de sujets qui ont été abordés. On va revenir sur quelques points essentiels. On va survoler parce qu'on ne va pas prendre beaucoup de temps là, ce soir. Mais on reviendra plus en profondeur sur ces sujets demain. Je suis toujours avec Jules qui avait un œil sur le chat durant cette interview. Jules, cette conférence, elle a duré. Il a abordé beaucoup de sujets. Alors parfois, c'était des sujets qui étaient entremêlés. Mais si on devait en ressortir quelques-uns, 2 ou 3 de cette conférence de presse, lequel toi tu retiendras en premier?
Un des sujets que les abonnés attendaient le plus, et les journalistes aussi également, c'est est-ce qu'il y aura un nouveau successeur à David Friio? Quel va être le profil recherché? En tout cas, ce qu'on a entendu, alors il a un petit peu éludé la question au début avant d'y répondre plus en détail, c'est expliquer que David Friio n'avait pas forcément le profil qui correspondait à la vision de l'Olympique Lyonnais, et il voulait plutôt un profil plus recruteur, plus proche du terrain. Donc ça veut dire que le prochain directeur sportif, ou en tout cas celui qui remplacera numériquement David Friio, n'aura pas totalement le même profil. Il a surtout aussi parlé de beaucoup améliorer la cellule de recrutement avec des scouts qu'on a déjà et en rajouter un petit peu plus. Donc il va y avoir un léger changement dans l'organigramme. Ça, on imagine un petit peu, mais on a un peu plus d'informations sur le profil du futur remplaçant de David Friio. Et alors pour l'arrivée, on ne sait pas encore, mais en tout cas, voilà, on voit un peu plus le projet et les envies de John Textor et du board de l'Olympique Lyonnais.
On reprendra les extraits en tout cas de cette conférence de presse dès demain dans LNS à 18h. Sujet que moi je retiens, des premiers qui a été abordé, c'est concernant ces rumeurs d'achat d'Everton, où il a bien souligné que c'était un achat qui le concernait personnellement et qui n'était pas lié à Eagle Football Group, ce qui veut dire que de ce côté-là, il n'y aura pas d'impact de cet achat d'Everton sur les finances d'Eagle Football Group et donc sur l'Olympique Lyonnais directement, et aussi le fait que de lui-même il a réinjecté de l'argent dans l'Olympique Lyonnais. Ce sujet-là financier qu'il a détaillé avec notamment l'entrée en bourse de Eagle Football Group à New York. Voilà, c'est tout un sujet.
De la part de Crystal Palace.
Il y a beaucoup de sujets qui en ont découlé, mais c'était une grosse partie de cette conférence de presse. Et puis la dernière partie que l'on peut souligner, c'est la gestion du mercato, ce qui s'est passé durant l'été. Alors financièrement, c'était relié à cette partie-là, mais aussi sur tout l'humain et la relation de certains cas.
Oui, il y a la question du mercato aussi bien pour les arrivées que pour les départs, ou plutôt non-départs. Il a été beaucoup question d'Anthony Lopez ou de Ryan Cherki. David Friio justement en parlait, qui pendant un point presse pendant le stage expliquait que Maxence Cacré et Ryan Cherki étaient potentiellement sur le départ et qu'il y avait eu des offres. John Textor l'a dit, il y a eu des propositions pour Ryan Cherki. On avait entendu parler d'une proposition du Paris Saint-Germain, puis ensuite de Dortmund qu'il a refusé, Fulham et Crystal Palace effectivement aussi. Et donc il est toujours là, il est en négociation pour sa prolongation. Il a fait un peu d'humour avec la coupe de cheveux de Ryan Cherki qui changeait et qui était peut-être un bon signe pour sa prolongation contre Renault. Et même chose pour Anthony Lopez, il y a eu des discussions et il a expliqué que voilà, le rôle de gardien était un rôle à part et que Anthony Lopez était toujours dans l'effectif, qu'il s'inscrivait toujours à l'Olympique Lyonnais et qu'il devait se battre pour essayer de récupérer sa place, parce qu'on le sait depuis le début de saison, les 3 premiers matchs, c'est Lucas Perry qui est le titulaire et on a cru comprendre que Rémi Descamps également était passé devant dans la hiérarchie.
Et puis pour terminer, c'était le mercato, les prochains mercatos qui arrivent, les relations avec Botafogo, notamment ce joueur Thiago Almada, Adrielson aussi qui est à Botafogo, la possibilité de pouvoir revenir à l'OL ou en Europe, c'est forcément ce qui va occuper les esprits. Mais avant ça, il y aura la reprise du championnat, des matchs qui vont arriver, la Coupe d'Europe. Donc cette conférence de presse de John Textor, ça sera un de nos sujets de demain. Si vous aviez l'habitude de regarder OLNS à cette heure-ci, d'habitude, c'est la rediffusion. On parle de l'académie. Donc demain, nous parlerons aussi de l'académie. Nous reviendrons sur la conférence de presse de John Textor. Et puis, comme d'habitude, les jeudis, vous savez maintenant, nous aurons quelques sondages à vous proposer avant de parler vendredi de l'avant-match vraiment particulier de Lens. Mais Jules, on va peut-être parler rapidement de ce petit sondage qui nous attend.
L'émission de demain, exactement. Pour ceux qui ont vu l'émission de mardi, vous avez reçu avec Mickaël Mouton, Yohan Louvel, le directeur technique de l'Académie de l'Olympique Lyonnais. Et vous lui avez fait une présélection de joueurs formés à l'OL, peut-être les meilleurs joueurs de l'histoire formés à l'OL. Et le but, c'était de lui demander son 11 de légende des joueurs de l'Académie de l'OL. On avait fait la même chose avec Fabien Caballero, lui aussi de l'Académie il y a quelques mois. Et on va faire la même chose demain pour vous, les abonnés du compte Twitter OL Play. Le sondage qui devrait arriver vers 20h30, 21h environ. On vous a fait une présélection avec gardiens, défenseurs, milieu de terrain, attaquants. C'était compliqué de faire une présélection parce que notamment côté milieu de terrain, attaquant, de ceux qui ont eu des grands noms sortis de l'Académie de l'OL. Et donc on va vous proposer de faire votre 11 de légende des joueurs formés par l'OL. On va faire la même chose nous sur le plateau, que ce soit moi, toi ou Mickaël Mouton qui sera en plateau avec nous demain parce qu'on va parler d'Académie. Donc il va y avoir beaucoup de choses intéressantes. On va beaucoup parler d'Académie. Et ce que je retiens aussi, c'est une des dernières phrases de John Textor, c'est que l'objectif, c'est la Ligue des Champions.
On va se quitter sur ces mots avec le championnat qui reprend pour aller vers cet objectif. Et donc, rendez-vous demain, 18h au LNS, pour revenir sur cette conférence de presse. On vous l'a dit, l'Académie, Jules sera en plateau, Mickaël Mouton nous rejoindra. Nous parlerons aussi Première Ligue International Cup. Bref, merci de nous avoir suivis, merci d'avoir suivi cette conférence de presse, que vous soyez sur YouTube ou sur le canal OL Play. Et puis rendez-vous donc sur nos réseaux sociaux, sur X ou sur Instagram, pour nous suivre et donc voter pour ce 11 de l'Académie qui vous attend dès demain dans l'émission. Merci de nous avoir suivis. Rendez-vous demain, 18h. Jules, bonne soirée.
Bonne soirée et
à demain.
Ouais, à demain.
Allez, bonne soirée à vous, à demain et continuez de regarder OL Play. Merci.